Alright, so gear list. This is, no way do I think that this is like the ultimate gear list. It's just gear that I took and I thought it worked alright. And because a few of you guys are asking about it, so I thought it might be a good idea. Also, it's good for me to do these gear lists because I can look back. If I want to do this right again, I can look back and kind of remember what I took and what I would change. So yeah, just putting that disclaimer out there. I don't think this is the gear list, but it's one of. In context, so New Zealand are going to the US. I had a couple of anxieties and I kind of packed my gear around those anxieties. So one was the weather, two was the altitude, and the other anxiety was the wildlife. So I'll get to that in the end. So I'll go through kind of the gear that I rode with, then the sort of other gear that I took, and then I'll finish on the navigation. Some people were interested in that, and I quite liked how that all kind of worked. And I might be able to do some screenshots and things like that as well. So the gear that I rode with, now, pretty much used all pedal-edge stuff. I was really happy with it. So the bibs, I actually only took one pair of bibs, and then realised halfway through that wasn't a great idea. For the reason being that if you get saddle sores, 2 pairs of bibs can help. So I really just used one pair of bibs that I rode with that every day, which were these pedal-edge bibs. I love them because they've got the pockets on them. They kind of fit my ass pretty good. And I love the bibs just because they don't slip down. They're kind of the only time where they do suck is when you want to go taller on the side of the road because you're pretty much going to strip down naked to go. So that was the bibs that I wore every day. When I felt like I needed to, like if it was going to be a real climby day, I actually bought these in Pinedale. So these are inner kind of bibs that went with some mountain bike shorts, and I managed to convince the guy at Bison, I think it's Bison Bikes, that I really needed them. So he gave me those at a discounted rate. So that really helped. I wore 2 pair of bibs quite a lot towards the end. It made quite a difference on my ass anyway. I did a couple of big days out of Helena, which kind of did a bit of damage. So that helped sort of repair it. On the top, there was a couple of scenarios. So if it was cold, I had this base layer, it's like a merino, pedal-led merino base layer. That was really good, like super good for when it was cold, but it was also, it was quite a nice top to sleep in as well, if it was a bit chilly. The next top was this top. It was so good. Like, I don't know if you're like me, like I'm a sweater, get really hot, so whatever I wear on top needs to dry quickly. That's the problem I have with Lycra. I end up staying wet too long and I get really cold. This is a really lightweight, I don't know if you can probably see through it, it's a really lightweight merino, and it dries super fast and it's super comfy. I love cycling these cycling tops, or any cycling top, because I love to be able to unzip. When it's 40 degrees outside, I don't want nothing zipped up. I don't want anything up here. I want it unzipped. I prefer that function even over the pockets. I just love to be able to unzip and get the air running through. The last piece of kit that I wore kind of every day, and this was an awesome piece of kit. Again, pedal-led vest. And it's got this kind of like liner, like this fleece lining in it. Always started the day with this, and when it got a bit hot, it zips from the bottom up. Again, lets the air flow through. Really good vest, and it dries real quick. So all of this stuff dries really quick. I did wear arm warmers. Again, start of the day, These aren't peddler, these are Ground Effects Merino arm warmers. Really good. I'm stoked I got these. I got these just before I left. I wasn't really happy with the other arm warmers I had. These were warm, but they breathed really well. Again, dried real quick. I did always have in my back pocket to transition to sun sleeves. Plastic sun sleeves, mate. I never worn them before, but I figured that I was going to be in some pretty intense sun all day, and I've got to try and look after my skin a little bit more. So they were really good. They actually kept you quite cool when they got wet. I like them. I'd wear them again. I wore a hat underneath my helmet, which was, I think, was alright. It keeps the sun off. You can see it's all sun bleached, so the sun gets in there. Would I wear one again? Do I think it was critical? No, I don't think it was critical, but it was quite good to have a visor, especially when it got really hot. Sun was up, you could flip the visor down, so you know, it's pretty good. I wore fingerless gloves every day, and I'll go over my other gloves when I get to the extra stuff. This is just the stuff that I wore kind of every day. And some nice pedal-lead socks. These were really nice, actually. Interestingly, we'll use this to segue into the other gear. So I was battling with whether I take waterproof seal skin socks or not, or whether I use plastic bags or nothing. I had a friend who's done it quite a few times, who sort of mentioned that, hey, look, it might not be critical to have sealskin socks, just good merino socks. So anyway, these are merino silk, merino silk blend from pedal-lead. Odyssey socks, so they're for long distance biking. They're a little bit knackered now, they got a bit thin in the heel, but interestingly, I took 3 pairs of socks. These ones were the ones that I slept in at night, and I always had to keep them dry. These ones are the ones for when it was really cold and these weren't working and I needed a warmer sock. So these are an Icebreaker merino, quite thick hiking sock. I never used them. I never used them once, actually. I found that with a plastic bag at worst, that these socks were fine. They got me through the whole tour. And I mean, we were walking through snow for the first, 4 or 5 days. Yeah, my feet got cold, but they didn't get freezing cold, not to the point where I found it an issue. I probably, if I was going to do it again, wouldn't take these. That saves me that much space in my bag. I would have a brand new pair of these socks again, because they were truly quite, my friend was right. He just said, take merino socks, let your feet get wet and you'll be fine. The other stuff that I took in terms of clothing, so gloves. So I had 2 pairs of gloves. I had my riding gloves, which were the fingerless ones. Actually, I had 3 pairs of gloves. My riding gloves, these gloves, and these mittens. So I did wear these a reasonable amount just in the mornings by themselves, and there were a couple of real cold days, like Whitefish to Holland Lake when it was raining all day and snowing. I wore these under my mitts. So these are like OR gloves. They're like winter weight gloves. They're really comfortable and they still kind of keep you quite warm when they're damp and wet. These are OR Gore-Tex mitts. I bought these because they had a really good write-up on bikepacking.com. They don't sell them in Gore-Tex anymore, but I managed to find some in some country. Gore-Tex mitts. And I've got a story about those as well, with combination with the jacket, so I'll just put it in there. I also had a Merino Beanie. I wore that once. I would still take it again because you never know, but I hardly wore that. I had a buff that I cut in half when I got to New Mexico and wore it just as a sunshade. I used it both times. I think if I was going again, I'd possibly take a buff that's uncut and then take this one just for the sun. It really made quite a big difference in the sun, tucking it all around and covering the ears and things. I wore it a bit awkwardly, and would make sure next time that I had a bit better of a system to wear that to cover my neck and face and ears and stuff. I opted to take, instead of a down puffy jacket, I took this Arcterics synthetic jacket. I did that for the main reason being is that if it gets damp it still works, and secondly if it gets wet it's easy to dry. It dries quite quickly, and you know, if a down gets wet you can bugger it trying to dry it. So I'm glad I went for that. I used it a lot more for a pillow than I did actually wearing it. I think a couple of times in the evening when I got to a camp I put it on, in the mornings. Regardless, I would always take it again. Like, I wouldn't not go without a jacket, a warm jacket. But it did make a good pillow. For rain gear, as well as those Gore-Tex mitts, I had these Ground Effects splashdown pants. I went with pants. I've actually got the Helter Skelters, which is like a 3/4 short. It's exactly the same as these, but just a bit shorter. I decided to go with pants. I think I read something from Josh Cato where he was like, I always take pants. He'd been in so many situations, just having a few extra inches made a massive difference. And I agree. I think if the weather really turned to custard, these would be better than the 3/4 pants for me anyway. They keep you quite warm, which was one of the main reasons why I took them as well, because I didn't have pants per se. That was the only pant I actually had, full length pants in the end. So jackets. Now the jacket was the first saga. So I started out with a shake dry jacket. Again, really nice jacket, Arcterics shake dry. Got to Whitefish and the zip flogged out. So I was two minds whether to take it or not at first, actually, because in the sunshine I could see a couple of pinholes through it. But I took it because I really like this jacket. But yeah, got to Whitefish and the zip flogged out. So then had to wait until 9:30 until the shop opened to get a new jacket. So I ended up buying, like, this was literally the best jacket in the shop I could find. It was a Patagonia. Don't know what it is, but Gore-Tex jacket, I think. Actually, it might not be. Doesn't even say what one it is. The dude in the shop was just like, this is the best one you're going to get. So it's got the zips under the arm. It's a lot heavier than the shake dryer. But what I will say about that is that I wore this on the wettest, coldest day. Like, I would have been completely shagged without this. And I suspect that I would have had a lot of trouble also with the shake dry jacket. As much as I love the shake dry, once I wore this, I realised that it actually wasn't really performing that well, and I'm not sure whether or not that's because it's got pinholes in it, or whether it's got it's just ended its life. But when I wore the shake dry jacket with the Gore-Tex gloves, and I could have them inside the sleeve or have this outside the sleeve, water would get in this glove, and which was a bit of a problem for some part of the journey when I was climbing some snowy passes and it was wet. I'd have wet hands. They were kind of not warmish, but they weren't freezing because they were in this glove, and I could put the other glove on. But I was a bit annoyed with the glove because I was like, these gloves are useless, water's getting in my gloves, blah blah blah. Anyway, wore the Patagonia with these and put the jacket over top so the sleeve come here, and these stay dry. So I don't know why the Gore-Tex shake dryer was leaking as much as it was. Like, it was leaking a lot. Like, the water that was coming out, I'd tip it out and it would pour out of my gloves. So, don't know. I don't know if it was an old jacket thing or it's a shake dry thing. Be disappointing if it was a shake dry thing. But anyway, the Patagonia ended up saving my bag, to be honest, because that day was freezing cold. Now, there was other clothing I took that I sent home. So I took, in addition to that gear there, that was my core gear, I took this lightweight technical fleece. It really weighs not a lot. I don't know how much grams it weighs, but it doesn't weigh much at all. It's a Summit series. I thought I would probably wear this underneath my rain jacket when it was really cold. I didn't need to. One point, maybe from Holland Lake to towards Holland Lake, I was like, oh, should I put my technical fleece on? I'm getting freaking cold. I kind of didn't need to. And that was a big day. That was 180 Ks on the bike for I don't know how many hours, but it was a long time. And I was considering putting it on in, but I didn't. If I needed to stop for an emergency, I could have set up my tent and jumped in my sleeping bag. That was always my plan B. Something to say about that though, like if you had to stop to fix a tyre because you got a slash in your tyre, that would be a pretty serious situation, I think, in that circumstance. It was a low of 1, high of 4, it was snowing over the passes. It was pretty sketchy. I probably would have put it on then. If I didn't have that, I would have put on my insulated Arcterics jacket though, underneath my jacket, so I think I'd still send that home. The other thing I sent home was leg warmers. I had these like these Endura leg warmers. I used them at home and I thought I'd use them a bit more. I never used them. So I sent the stuff home at Pinedale. All the stuff went home in a box. Pinedale. The other thing I sent home was these Icebreaker merino pants. Again, I thought that it might be really cold and I might wear them to bed. I thought quickly about putting these on between Whitefish and Holland Lake again. But didn't need to. I didn't. But that would have been the only situation where I would have considered putting them on. I sent back at Pinedale these Gore-Tex over booties. They were okay in the rain, but they don't like tramping through the snow. And my feet still got wet, so I don't know. I don't think that I would wear these again. I don't feel I needed them so much. They were comfortable at the start, but your feet always got wet. Sent those back, and I also had a camera. I thought I would take some photos, but I didn't, and it's really heavy. It was like 300 grams or something crazy like that. So I sent that back in Pinedale as well. So that is all my extra kit that I wore, as well as some of the bits and pieces I sent home. So I think I'll go through the equipment per bag. So I had this bag, which is a Rebel 8 bag. It's the only bag I had with a zip. So in that bag, I kept my electronics. I had all my charger cables and everything kept in here. And also, I brought with me this Cord Joe, which is like a 4 charger, 2 fast chargers and 2 normal chargers. Honestly, it worked great. Like, the first thing I did when I got to accommodation or whatever, or a power source, is I got all my electronics out and charged everything. Worked awesome. In the front bag, I also kept just a headlight. I figured that if I was going to need a headlight, it would be a bit of a random situation, so I had it handy. Had that. Sunscreen. I didn't dick around with a small sunscreen in the end. I kind of got a reasonable sunscreen. I've still got heaps in there too. I also kept a little wallet for some monies, and I kept some first aid stuff. So some bandages, gel bandages. I got these from a clinic. I can't even remember it was, somewhere close to Jackson. So this is Dermagerm. These pads. They're a medicated patch. And they come with, if you're lucky, this glue, liquid adhesive. You glue these bad boys on your ass. You cut them in half, put them on each side of your cheek. That being said, you can really only do that when you can stop for a few days. But they healed my ass in Pinedale. But I kept those in the top bag there. And then the other things I kept, well, like my passport and things like that, travelling documents. I kept some gear aid patches as well. The gear aid patch for fixing jackets, and air mattresses and things like that. That was pretty much all I kept. I think I had my backup GPS in there as well, and spare GoPro batteries, and butt butter. That was pretty much it. In the back there, in the front pocket there. In my the next bag I had was on a bracket. So on the front, behind the River Lake bag with a zip, I had this bracket. I made this bracket about, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. It is awesome. So it's aluminium, carbon fibre. Obviously, that you bolt your aero bars into this clamp here. So this clamp replaces the bottom bracket on the aero bars, and it sits just underneath. And it sits it's got just enough space in here to put your sleeping bag. So that there's a bag from Southern Light Packs down south in New Zealand. They made that denim a bag. Put my sleeping bag in there. And this is awesome, like you can bolt stuff to this. This is so solid. My sleeping bag is a Kiwi Ultralight. It's a New Zealand company in Nelson. And that's a quilt, actually. That was a 0 degree bag. So it's 30 Fahrenheit, right? Something like that. It was pretty warm. Like, first few nights I was sweating in it. But the good thing about a quilt is you can just pull your legs out. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'd take that again. If it got really cold, I would have been sweet ass. So that is that front part of the bag there. The next part is the frame bag. So frame bag is a porcelain rocket, and I've got porcelain rocket because 1, it's waterproof, and 2, it's a roll top, so I don't have a zip, and you can just ram so much stuff in here. I rammed more stuff in this than I did on the tour of Aotearoa. I didn't realise how much stuff you could get in this. So in that bag, I kept my tent poles, and I've got an MSR hubber tent poles in there. I also carried, I'll go over that next. Carried my first aid kit. First aid kit I kept real simple. Never opened this bag, but I guess you got to have one, right? I don't think you need anything elaborate. You're never too far away from a medical centre or whatnot. The other thing that I had, probably wouldn't take again, was a little head covered mosquito thing. I kept a tube. Wasn't like that. This is another one, but I kept a spare tube in there. I've actually vacuum packed a tube, so it was nice and flat. Cedar Summit cup. I only used this once. Would I take it again? Probably not. It took up next to no space though, but I probably wouldn't take that again. I didn't really need it. What else did I take in there? I took all my plastic bags. So part of my beer strategy, one of the parts of my beer strategy was I was going to use smell-proof bags. So I had a real big bag, two smaller bags, and this real big bag here. I could put a lot of food in that. So I would, if I was in a campground with a toilet, I'd put all my bag, all my food in the smell-proof bag and then put it in the toilet. Or if I was camping, I would sometimes put it in this and then put it in this dry bag and hang the dry bag in the tree. It was quite easy. My first experience, I had it all done up like that, and a guy was hanging it with a really long stick on the branches, really long stick, which I thought was pretty cool. So that's the way I hung my food too. Also in that frame bag I kept my zip ties, a bit of an assortment, and I also kept, I always have this bag, this orange bag is like my self-care bag. I had a little towel, which I didn't use. Probably still take it again though, because you never know. Like if it was really raining and you had to jump in your tent, you would probably need this. You'd have to dry yourself off. In that I had my toothbrush, toothpaste, pseudo cream. This is really good. I basically started putting this on from day one, just as a preventative. Didn't really help when it got real bad, but the other thing I picked up along the way was some acne cream for my ass. This has got the benzoyl peroxide, which is the secret ingredient for sorting out saddle sores. And also picked up some triple action antibiotic cream, just in case my saddle sores become real bad and open. And earplugs, which I used. Yep. Actually, the other thing that I forgot to talk about was sleep mask. I use these at home now and then, but more when I go away, because you can't control the light that's around you. I would definitely take these again. Like even some motels, like, you know, they have street lights right outside the door. I can't really sleep properly if there's a light. So sleep mask was quite helpful. And that, I'll segue into my drink bottles from there. So, okay, so my drink bottles that I had 2 feed bags up front, Stealth from New Zealand, Wellington Stealth feed bags, and I had a bottle each in those, just a normal drink bottle each. On down here, I have this bottle adapter sold by Cycleworks in New Zealand, and you can get that off the website. I think he sends them overseas too. Put 2 bottle cages on there. On the right hand side, I had my beer spray. Always had my beer spray close to me where I could grab it, and then another drink bottle on the left. So that was 2 drink bottles up here, 2 drink bottles down here. On the forks, I started out with 2 cycling drink bottles, and then as you'll see in the videos, it just turned into a disaster. They bounce out. Even when I strapped them in, I still lost one. I ended up deciding I'd change my strategy and go to something rigid, and so I got these Nalgene bottles. In hindsight, I actually would have put my king cages on the front rather than bottle cages. 2 reasons. You can put anything on there. Actually, it's the only reason. You can put anything on there. Doesn't just have to be one of these drink bottles. You can put a pump bottle on there. You can put anything on there. They're just a bit more versatile. And I found that I would drink all my other bottles and only use the front bottles, even when they were those 950ml cycling bottles. I would just use them for topping up. So I didn't need something that I could pull in and out. I just needed something that was solid and was going to work, and where I didn't lose my bottles. And they didn't have to have a sippy top, they just needed a lid. These worked awesome. So I got these at Brackenridge, and I just bent my cages out and I had 2 volley straps holding each one on, and that worked perfectly. Didn't really have a water issue. Water filtration, I ended up switching to Katadyn before I left, bee-free. That worked awesome, really well, really quick, and also I used it for storing water. So I could put a litre of water in here and put it in my frame bag, and I did that closer to New Mexico. So what I did in New Mexico now, I also had this bladder. So this was a 2 litre MSR bladder. In Mexico, New Mexico, I could fill that up, this up, that's 3 litres, 3, 4, 5 litres, including my 2 front bottles, and then I only had 500ml bottles, so 6.5 litres of water I had, and I was sweet as. Again, if it turned to custard and I got stuck in peanut butter mud or whatever, then that would have been a different circumstance, but if you were moving, 6.5 litres was fine. In actual fact, when I got to the Hashida, when we were going from Silver City to Hashida, I had this full of Powerade. You're probably not meant to do that, but I really don't care. I found the Powerade went down a little bit better than water, especially if it was warm. Warm Powerade's a bit more tolerable than warm water, oddly. Okay, top tube bag. Obviously, had that on the top tube. I broke that halfway through, but this still seems to stand up alright. It's not that waterproof though, which is a bit of a shame. So in here, I had the noon tablets for, isotonic supplements. I had always kept my titanium spork in here. It's such a great idea to do. Like, you can go to a supermarket, you can buy something. Many times I did this. You buy a cream pie or something that's in a container, you have to have a spoon or a fork. They don't often give you one. So I had this. I use this for eating berries and all sorts. So I always keep that in here. I mainly do that because if I keep it in a dry bag, I puncture it. So I always keep it in my top tube bag, and that actually works out awesome. And I kept a lot of my my Dynaplugs in here. I got it all in there now, but I kept just that stuff that you need that's handy, like a 6mm Allen key for my seat, a pocket knife. Definitely would take a pocket knife again. Just important things like that I kept in here. In the front, this is where I keep my battery pack, and that's where my K-Lite charger and all that sort of stuff is in there. So I'm running a Dynamo hub. I'll touch on that now actually. So I'm running a Dynamo hub, but I used these power packs, 2 of these power packs mainly. One I actually ended up keeping in the bottom of my frame bag as a backup, but I found that one power pack, if I was having accommodation every 2 or 3 days, was kind of almost enough. 2 or 3 days with this backup one, and it was enough. Got me through. I didn't actually use my Dynamo hub, I don't think, at all to charge these packs. I only use Dynamo in the end for the lights, and I must say the lights are awesome. K-Lite lights are awesome. I splashed out on a Cube rear light, and I'm super glad I did. You just don't have to worry about whether or not you've got a backlight that goes. They're solid. Actually, also attached to the frame bag, I keep one of these little doodads as well. These are awesome for clearing peanut butter mud, but also washing your bike. If you end up somewhere you need to clean your bike, you've got a brush. So that was a pretty important piece of kit too. So that is the top tube bag. Now, I used a Revelate Terrapin for the back. This one's pretty knackered now. I think it's a 14 litre. I couldn't use anything less than that. I kind of used that space just about all the time for food and things like that. So in the back of my seat pack, this was my tent. Like I say, this is the MSR Hubba. It's a single man tent. Had my pegs in there as well. I had my Thermarest Neo Air Uber Light, which is super light, but it is quite vulnerable to punches, so it's actually got a hole in it at the moment that I need to try and find. And I did take Thermarest Pump Sack to blow that up. I would do that again because it takes a lot of air to blow up. And then I had all the rest of my stuff, like some of my clothes and bits and pieces. I would pack in that rear pack as well. I don't think there's anything else in there that... Nah, that's all the stuff. So yeah, in the backpack. So, my electronics. So GPS, like I say, I had a backup. So my main one was a Wahoo Roam, and I had an InReach Mini 2 for my tracker, and super stoked I had this. Like I also used I could send messages to Jules, like we could text each other, so that was really cool. I would definitely recommend one of those. I found that more reliable than my spot tracker. The other thing I did take, before I forget, was this a Cedar Summit Nano Pack, and that is super important. I use this to get on the airport. I use this for extra food, water and things like that. They're critical, mate. I reckon they're one of the pieces of kit to take with you on a trip, on any bikepacking trip, but especially a Tour de Bike. Electronics, I'll talk about navigation, but I might be running out of battery, so I'm going to move on to my tools first. I'll do a separate one on navigation if I have to. So the toolkit, like I mentioned before, I kind of got this toolkit, most of these items off JP's gear list. Pretty happy with how it panned out. I used just about everything. So I ended up getting dental floss, right? Which in hindsight is super important. Spare bolts for my seat. Some safety pins that I didn't use but I would still take. And a little bag of just bits and bolts, proprietary bolts again for the seat. You know, cleat bolt, all that sort of, and cleat. I also had valve core remover, CO2 head, bacon strips. I need to clean this out, it's still munted from when I got in there. A needle, curve needle, I reckon that worked really good. And it's a valve core that I pulled out. I took thread, but I'd take thread again, but I'd make sure that I had dental floss. I think I had 3 sets of brake pads. I bought an extra set when I was down there as well. Spare piece of chain, spare long bolt. That was for my seat post. Actually, that was my bike shop, Lost Cycles in Wellington. He recommended, I think it was Stu recommended taking a spare one of those, because you'd be screwed, mate, if you lost one of those somehow, you know. That's a little key for my boa laces on my shoes. I actually serviced the boa laces before I left, and they work better than even the standard ones. So in the bottom part here, I had the pre-glued patches for a tube. That is the brake pads, another set of brake pads. How many brake pads did I use? 1, 2. I replaced 2 sets. This is a lead for my K-Light, spare lead. So what I actually did, more so when I had my Lauf fork, because the Lauf fork was a bit odd, it kind of looked, the lead looked vulnerable, so I made a new lead from here down so that if I damaged it, I could just unplug it and replace it. It's probably still a good idea. In actual fact, when there's peanut butter mud here, rather than it stretching the cord up, it just popped off. It was easier to clean than just plug back in. So that's a spare lead for my K-Light. CO2 and stand sealant. This tool here is really good, man. Like, this is, again, Stu sold me this. He's a good salesman. Wolf tooth. This is like replace my multi-tool, because I said to Stu, I don't like my multi-tool. I'm thinking about just taking normal Allen keys. But this actually worked out really well. It's got everything you need. It's even got this little knifey thing in here. You know, it's pretty trick. Tyre leather, obviously use that. And this chain breaker, but it's also got, you know, all your tools in there and links, and so that was really cool. I'm glad I bought that. It wasn't cheap, but it works really well. Bit of a rag, obviously wipe things down, but just to keep everything from stop rattling around in here. The other thing that I'm glad I took, and I wasn't going to take this, was my Leatherman. Mainly took this because of these awesome pliers, and I did use those. They are really heavy, but yeah, I think you got to take them. Little toothbrush just to clean stuff if you're repairing something. A link, super glue, really important if you tear a sidewall. You super glue up the join, sew it, and then glue over the stitch, and it's awesome. Yeah. I had some Tyre Boots. I've only got one left, and the other part of my brake pad, and this little hook. Stu, again from Lost Cycles in Wellington, made this up for me. It's just a spoke with a bend and a sharp pointy thing. Really cool if you need to remove your gear cable. You can get the thing in there and pull it out, but also really good for cleaning your teeth and whatnot. Seriously, I did use it for that. So that is my tools, and I just kept my tools down there right really low because it's kind of the heaviest bottle I've got on there. Yeah, I'll talk about my navigation. Yeah, we'll talk about it, and then I'll put in some screenshots off my phone running out of batteries. So I got the whole route when it came out, like a few days before we left, and I split that into the ACA map sections, section 1 to 6. I actually did buy the maps and the book and studied those maps, and we took photos of the maps and scanned them and that, and you know what, I never used them. I never looked at those maps. What I ended up using was mainly my GPS file, and I also used the ACA app, which I'll show you right now. Alrighty, so I'm going to open that app up, start the app. Alright, so it's worthwhile pointing out the obvious too, is that these map sections that are on the ACA app are the Great Divide mountain bike route. They're not necessarily the Tour Divide route. There are slight deviations in the Tour Divide route, however you know where they are and where they're coming up, and you just kind of use the app to suit. So you can go to a route catalogue, you can buy each section individually or buy the whole lot. I think I just bought each section as I needed them. We had some fiery routes in 6, so I didn't bother buying that one. To be honest, I didn't need that Canada one either. Yeah, so you buy them. So Roseville to Helena, I'll open that one up. The cool thing about this is that it gives you all the camp spots, so you can click on the camp spot. You can obviously you can ring them or whatever. What I found quite useful was this distance from point, so you could click on that and say you were wanting to know from this Upper Whitefish campground how far away that point is. You can see there, and you can scroll that back to see a little bike dude, he's coming down the hill, so you can see the distance and also the climbing. So I found that super useful, so I could plan out my next day by going, you could actually use the point. So from that one there, so say that residence there, you could go click the distance from me button, which when you're en route, I'm in New Zealand, so it's not going to work now, but when you click that button, it'll give you that
that profile of climbing. So I found that feature super useful, just to plan out my day, especially giving you that climbing elevation profile. Other thing it does is it does weather warnings. There's no weather warnings over there currently, but obviously it does the fires, so you can click on the fire there and it'll give you fire information. And then you just simply, if you go to your next, so even if we did Rawlins to Salida, there's no weather warnings there either, but it does a really cool weather warning, which obviously we used a lot when it was in Canada. These little arrows, it gives you the weather and the wind, and all that sort of information as well. I don't think there's anything else there that I need to show you. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is, the app was really useful. And like I say, I use this a lot. It'll show you where the bike shops are, which is super handy. But mainly I used it to plan out my day because I could do the distance from me thing and then see what the elevation and things like that were.
And the other thing I used was the 1 of 7 PDF. So I bought the 1 of 7, and he updated it for 2022. So it had, it's like a spreadsheet almost of every point of interest that's coming up. What I did, which I'm stoked I did, so when I broke up my map into 6 sections, I added all of those point of interest as queues. So all the point of interest from the 1 of 7 spreadsheet, I added those into my GPS files as queues. So I knew when food stops were coming up, when passes were coming up, it would count down how many kilometres I had until my next water stop or food stop or point of interest that I added. I didn't add them as a point of interest, I added them as a queue because the point of interest won't pop up, but queues will. So what did I use for navigation? GPS, the ACA app, and the 1 of 7 sheet. I also had Gear on my phone with the whole route downloaded, and I'm glad I used that as well. So there were 4 pieces of equipment. There were 4 things that I used for navigation. I didn't use one solely, apart from obviously the GPS file was the most important thing. But I had those other resources as well to get me down. I think that's it. The bike went really well. I was pretty stoked. I changed my drivetrain from a 1x to a 2x before I left. A 28 or a 25 by 36 in the front, and a crazy 11 by 46 in the back. And I only had 46 because that's what I had when I had 1x, and I wasn't going to change my cassette just because. So hardly ever used 46, but used the one down from that a lot. But just really found the versatility of a 2x much better for me than the 1x. And I didn't have any issues with the front derailleur. The other thing I probably will say is that, and I mentioned it quickly in the video, I can't remember which day it was, but I had a Lauf fork on there. And look, stuff goes wrong, no product is perfect. But my opinion and my feedback of the Lauf has got nothing to do with the fact that it failed on me. Like, what was a failure? The leaf spring started swelling and delaminating, and so I could just bottom it out just by pushing on it next to it. So yeah, it was knackered. Those leaf springs delaminated and I lost all the tension. That has nothing to do with my opinion necessarily of the performance of the Lauf. So the performance is quite separate from that failure. And the reason it's significant to me is because that suspension fork, which is a Fox 32, factory 32, it's a really nice fork, like a really nice fork, changed the way this bike operated on the technical stuff so much better than the Lauf fork. The Lauf fork has, it's independent on each side, so you have this movement as well as the up and down movement. And I believe, for me, it makes the technical descending quite unstable feeling. Like if you're descending down, your wheel's doing this as well as this. It feels not as stable as something like that that's tuned and is only moving up and down. That fork felt way better on the technical stuff. Also, anyone you ask who's got a loud fork, if they've been honest with you, they have this wobble. So if you get any weight at all on the front, they develop this wobble. And it can be pretty extreme if you've got a lot of stuff on there. These forks don't have that wobble. They're way better in every circumstance, apart from weight. The only thing that a loud fork has over one of these is the fact that they're really light. And also the other thing that a loud fork has over is if you do carry drink bottles on there, they don't eject. Apart from that, I don't see any point in having a loud fork when you can get something like a Fox 32. Way better. Thanks, people. Great trip, man. I arrived on Wednesday back into New Zealand. It's now Saturday. I'm feeling my body's fine, I didn't really push myself too hard in the end. Stoked to be home. I've finally, in the last day or two, kind of gone, you know what, that was an awesome ride. I think up until then I was just like, I just want to get home. I've had enough of this now. But now I've had time to process it. What an amazing ride, man. Like, seriously. I can, no wonder people love doing it. And I thought that my mate Jeff Blanche was crazy, mate, when I finished my last day. He's done it 4 times. I was like, what sort of a masochist does that? But I get it now, mate. I get it. You know, we're kind of, I'm rested, I'm feeling good, and I can understand why people do it more than once now. It is a beautiful trip. It is mentally and physically exhausting and will challenge you on everything that you didn't even know existed. I never knew that I would struggle mentally and emotionally with the challenges as much as I did. But, you know, it'll break you, mate, on a daily basis when you think you've got a handle on it. But at the same time, there's a beauty in that breaking. It makes you vulnerable, and it gives you the experience that it gives you. You know, like if you weren't broken, it wouldn't be as beautiful, mate. I don't think. Not for me, anyway. The fact that it broke me just made it that much better now that I've finished. And it's just a beautiful country to ride through. So, that's me. I'm out, mate. Any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best.